I really did not think that I would make it out of my 20s. I didn't think that I would make it to 30. My way of achieving status was inherently harmful to other people. It like gutted me. He was in my face like a rabid dog telling me about how he's going to kill me, choke me to death. I've experienced actually a lot of pain. A lot of the family stuff has been very painful. And this gets us into very interesting and somewhat controversial stuff about chronic illness. That part of him needed to be sick. I completely lost my connection to sexuality. About a decade of rock bottom, but at 18, two things happened that were kind of crazy.
What if I told you that at the lowest part of rock bottom, there's a trampoline? Welcome to the Rock Bottom Podcast. I'm your host, Mayssa. Today's guest is Flynn Skidmore. He's a therapist, teacher, and guide trained in internal family systems and somatic experiencing. The way I found Flynn and his work is actually during my own rock bottom when his videos started showing up on my For You page. And every video and the message within it felt divinely timed. It was exactly what I needed to hear when I needed to hear it. In this conversation, Flynn tells us about how his rock bottom spanned almost a decade, forcing him to confront an inner darkness and learn to work with it rather than against it. And something that I loved about this conversation is that Flynn is our first male guest here on Rock Bottom, and he was not afraid to go there. We cover everything from toxic masculinity to sexuality and celibacy, from depression to qigong, and so much more. I'd like to share up front that there's mention of suicidal thoughts in this episode. If you or someone you know is in crisis or having thoughts of suicide, please reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Flynn Skidmore, welcome to Rock Bottom.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here because actually the way I discovered you through the internet is that in my own rock bottom, I think the algorithm knew something that I needed, which was your videos. So when I was actually in a really kind of dark place and scrolling a lot of TikTok, I was getting some of your videos. I was actually scrolling back through some of my camera roll from that time. I had a bunch of videos of yours downloaded.
Amazing.
And I was revisiting them. So that is how I kind of first came across you and your work. And I'm just so honored and grateful to have you here today and to hear more about your story and chat.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be in your camera roll and very cool that our timelines connected in that way. So thank you for having me.
Oh, I love that. So we like to dive right in here. So can you tell me about your childhood and your upbringing and what you were like as a child?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love that. Okay, childhood and upbringing. I grew up in Fort Greene in Brooklyn, which at the time was mostly a Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. So I was one of just a few white kids in a space that was predominantly Black and Puerto Rican. And that was interesting for me because I didn't know that whiteness was the dominant culture in the country until I was maybe in 5th grade. So it wasn't something that I was aware of. I actually experienced myself as the minority. And I'm really so grateful that I had that experience. Like I experienced my parents listening to 95.5 WPLJ, if you're from New York, with like Alanis Morissette and like the Smashing Pumpkins as weird. And my friends whose parents were listening to like Hot 97 Friday reggae as the thing that like was the right thing, So I had this experience of being an outsider, which shaped me in a lot of ways in terms of how I observed things. And I liked that a lot, but then it also came with some challenging things because as I came of age in my neighborhood, it became time to become a target for being white. So the first time I got jumped, I was like 9 years old and just got the shit beaten out of me. And I understood it was because I was white. I understood the dynamics and I even understood like the anger or the resentment towards me. And I wasn't angry about the resentment, which is cool. I don't know how I had that awareness, but those are some of the main things that shaped me was racial dynamics and going from perceiving myself as a minority to then recognizing that actually I represented the majority and navigating that shift.
Yeah. And probably some kind of understanding of like the power dynamics that were at play from a very young age?
My immediate power dynamics were that like because where I grew up, the block that I grew up was placed right in between 3 project houses. So anytime I was walking home, I had to walk through the projects, which were predominantly Black and probably still are. And those, like when you're growing up as a white kid in Brooklyn, it's just understood that Black kids can beat you up. That's just what it is. And I also come from a form of masculinity from my dad, who's very like, he was born in Brooklyn, but mostly grew up in Long Island in Pennsylvania. Very like white, blue collar, working class, where violence is a marker of status. And so I'm getting that information about masculinity from my dad and his family. It's like a rite of passage for the men in my family to like beat the shit out of their dads at some point. And that's like the thing.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. And then in my immediate environment, like I'm around these kids from the projects who are mostly Black, Puerto Rican, and Dominican, who like can beat me up, that I'm afraid of. And so like where the power dynamics came in for me was, okay, I'm feeling emasculated by my immediate surroundings because these other kids have this thing that's valued in my family more than I have it. What do I do with that?
Yeah.
Like, how do I navigate that world? How do I appear to be the thing that I feel afraid of?
Right.
And I think a lot of men navigate that kind of stuff, but I think it was hyper concentrated for me in that little block that I was on.
And from such a young age, where at the end of the day, you're a boy, you're a child, and then this expectation of like violence or hardness or toughness that I think for so many boys and men comes so early and way too young, I would argue. And honestly, ever, as if anyone should be able to, you know, exert and receive violence, like that's should be a part of your identity and your personality. So I can only imagine you're like experiencing this sort of fear and terror out in your neighborhood, and then you come home and you also can't be sensitive or feel your true feelings about it, which is probably pain and fear and sadness.
Yeah. And so in my home itself, like on the one hand, so my parents have it was just this little apartment in the ground floor of a brownstone. My parents have amazing taste. I think that my mom is probably one of the flyest women in New York City,
I love that.
but they're like middle class. They just understand, their sensibility is remarkable, and their cozy IQ is insanely high. Like it's so cozy. It's beautiful. Our family dynamics are warm and loving and fun, but then they're also explosive and violent and sometimes like demonic. So it was a little bit confusing at home because on the one hand, it was like the best. I loved the neighborhood I was in. I loved our home. Our family dynamics were so fun, but it was also like the things I was navigating in the neighborhood were also the exact same things that were in my home. I was so proud to be growing up in Fort Greene, and even proud to like have violence as part of my identity, but then also afraid of those things. And then the exact same things were in our home as well.
Yeah. Where was that explosiveness coming from in the home, do you think?
Well, mostly in my dad. So my dad is this like incredibly sensible, soulful person. He's an artist, but the experiences that he had as a kid were amazing. His dad was an artist as well, but like a little bit of like New York City misogynistic artist who was like super swaggy, but also probably slept with 2,000 women.
Oh, wow.
And also super violent and would beat the shit out of my dad. And so I think my dad like never really got to feel powerful in his sensitivity and soulfulness. I think the thing that he internalized as what power was rage and being angry and violence. And I don't think that he's like transcending it now. He's telling me all the time, like, I don't fight anymore. Don't worry about it. But like he didn't get to transcend that as a young father. So there was a lot of explosiveness, I guess, coming from him. But it's kind of a hard question to answer. When you say coming from, like maybe he was the representative of it or the embodiment of it, but where it comes from, I'm not totally sure. Like that could be a frequency that was created at the beginning of the universe and then just happened to show up in our home at that point, you know?
Yeah, of course. And I think it is, right? I think that all these violent patterns that, you know, come through our families and a lot of times through the masculine side of our families, you know, I experienced the same thing and I'm in a totally different culture. My family's from North Africa. You know, the country that we're from has spanned so many different like empires and colonizations and things like that, but it's still the through line of this like patriarchal kind of violent, authoritarian, controlling structure that I think a lot of men receive from such a young age. I mean, imagine being a small boy being beat by your father or seeing, you know, how men are treating women or treating other people. And it just becomes the program. It's just the program.
It's the program.
Right?
Yeah.
And what were you kind of like as a child?
So I went to public school as a kid. And my first day of kindergarten, I wore a suit by choice.
Okay, it tells us everything we need to know.
Like whatever you take from that, from that. I really don't understand why I did that. I think I was very outgoing and charismatic. I was kind and sweet. And when I was like, I went through a period in my 20s, like I actually think a lot of men do, where I was very caught up in what type of man I was supposed to be. And with all this like violent and toughness stuff, I thought I was supposed to be that type of man. And when I would see videos of me from when I was a little kid, I would hate them because I was so sweet as a little kid. And I hated that the truth of me was really sweet because I hadn't yet learned how to really own that and make it a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So I hated that sweetness. But I was also a very cunning little kid. Like I when I watch home videos of myself, I can see that I knew what I was doing. Manipulative in some ways. Like I could see like, oh, you were like trying to be cute there and everyone fell for it. But I remember that moment and I remember thinking I'm going to manipulate the world around me.
Yeah.
So I do think I had a lot of awareness of people's internal worlds and an understanding of how to like present something to have people perceive me in a particular way, which like I used to be ashamed of that, but now I kind of like that about myself. Yeah.
Well, and I find that's really common, I think, in a household that has like an unpredictable parent and an unpredictable dynamic, because from such a young age, you need to be able to like smell the temperature of the room when you walk in, when it's hot and cold. It's almost better to have a parent who's always enraged because then you can be kind of nonchalant and be like, they're going to be pissed no matter what. They're going to scream at me or beat on me no matter what. Not to say that's better. But I think the unpredictability kind of tunes you into a level of sensitivity to what's going on. And I think for a lot of kids, especially, you know, really bright kids, which I think all children are super smart and super bright, you can turn it into that manipulation, that cunning, which it sounds like is kind of how it played out for you.
Yes. A cool thing to consider about that is that kids who lie usually end up as having higher emotional intelligence.
Interesting.
Because the lying at a young age represents a capacity to understand the multiple layers of what's happening. You understand like another person's internal experience. In psychology, it's called theory of mind. Love, safety, and belonging is a result of approval. So you use your awareness of people's internal worlds in order to like lie to create the perception of you that you want that increases love, safety, and belonging.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And actually, it's so funny. I've been thinking a lot about lying lately because I've recently realized that I always have thought about myself as a person with like a lot of integrity and who's very honest, but I actually lie a lot. I'm growing out of it now and I'm like, you know, in my spiritual path and trying to become more aware of it. But yeah, I think it was something I picked up as a kid. It was just like, there were there was a lot of like control in the house, also a lot of rage. And I think I just picked up from an early age, like, we're going to lie about these things. And it almost got to a point where lying about certain things I didn't even classify as lying. It was just like getting through the day.
Right.
And so, yeah, but picking up on it now where there's all these little white lies that I don't even notice myself doing because it's become so second nature. And taking that accountability of like, am I being manipulative right now to get what I want? Like, we're grown-ups now, you know. I think it to your point, as a child, maybe it's like a adaptation that's actually useful or shows some sense of awareness. But then at some point you have to notice if you're continuing those patterns and it's now moving you like out of integrity or out of your value system. I also loved what you said, Flynn, about that you were a sweet boy. And that looking back, and there was a time in your life where seeing that sweetness felt like maybe a weakness or something that it kind of made you flinch. I think that's such a beautiful thing to talk about because as girls, it's almost like that actually is part of the manipulation is playing the sweet girl. And we get so rewarded for that. And I think in so many households, and it sounds like, you know, given the father figure in your life and maybe the dynamics around masculinity in your household, it really became like a source of shadow for you when the almost like the gag of it all is that your father and your grandfather were artists, which to me points to high levels of sensitivity. So it's almost interesting to wonder like what was really being masked below that toxic masculinity. They may have even been more sensitive than their peers if you were to rewind, and maybe you felt the same way as a small boy.
I think that's exactly what it is. And I think that my dad, for instance, didn't have a model for how his sensitivity and soulfulness and sweetness could be powerful. Because I do think that that's an important thing for men. A really interesting thing about testosterone is that it doesn't inherently encourage violent behaviors. It encourages whatever is perceived as a status marker. So if we're in a social context where violence is perceived as the highest status thing, higher levels of testosterone will produce violence and violence will produce testosterone. But if you switch that social hierarchy and you see that actually kindness and consideration are at the top of the hierarchy, testosterone would encourage more kindness and more kindness would produce more testosterone. Isn't that fascinating? Right?
And it kind of explains how like some like there could also be a toxic masculinity that pushes intellect or that, just depending on what was like the top value marker in the community you were in or religiosity or
That's exactly what it is. And so for my dad, I just think he grew up in a different time than we grew up in. And I don't think he had models of men that were as multi-dimensional as the models that we have now. And I don't even think the models that we have are that great. Like I see the next 10 years, those models evolving and becoming better. And I don't think he took it upon himself to create that model, to become it. You know what I mean? So I think he also, one of his demons or his shadows is the repression of the sweetness in himself because he is fearful that sweetness will lower him on the social hierarchy. But he is like the sweetest man I've ever met. He just hasn't, I don't think he ever learned for that to be like a really swaggy thing, for his sweetness to like be actually really hot. But it is really hot.
Yeah. I love that. It's like, being a sweet and sensitive boy needs to be the new like swag. Right?
Yes.
I feel like the shift is starting.
I think the shift is starting. And one of the things that I notice happening with that, I'm really curious about your perspective on this, because I think one of the things that I see with men is like, okay, we're hearing that women are asking us to be vulnerable or maybe to be sweet, but when we're sweet and when we're vulnerable, then we get rejected.
Yes.
I have takes on that, but I'm curious to hear what your takes on that are.
It's so, yes, I see this conversation as well. And look, at the end of the day, we are all programmed under, like, the patriarchal program is the program. Nobody is free from it, right? Including the women. So I do think that, you know, I think it's a really valid concern. I think that, like, you know, how will women really react on like a visceral level based on their like most underlying conditioning
Mhm.
if the man they were dating like cried in front of them or showed like that, you know, perceived weakness.
Mhm.
So that's where I think like if we're going to ask men to do that work, we have to do that work too.
Mhm.
Like I feel like I've, you know, been reflecting and interrogating a lot of these things, both like the systemic stuff and then my own personal like spirituality and belief systems. If a man I was like recently dating started crying on a date,
Mhm.
I can't sit here and say I'd be like, oh, let it out, baby.
Mhm.
Like, this is hot.
Mhm.
So that's where I think
Mhm.
we have to fight against the systemic programmed reaction, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think we can all understand that a man should be allowed to cry,
Mhm.
even if you just met him, even if you're dating, like, and show vulnerability.
Mhm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't show up in the ways he would need to make you feel safe in the context of your relationship.
Mhm.
So I think that's where it's like, whatever our initial reaction is, can we push past it
Mhm.
and find like, what's the truth of the situation
I
here,
love
right?
that.
Is this
Mhm.
still an attractive man,
Mhm.
even if he cried?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And then I think, so what I think I'm trying to say is like, you need to build a mental model that is stronger than your physiological model.
I like that. Like to have an ideal to strive towards. And even though your conditioning and your initial reaction might be one of repulsion, to figure out, to have the self-mastery to align yourself with your ideal, to practice being your ideal. So like, what is if you were on a second date with a guy and he started crying, okay, let's say you're on a second date with a guy and you were super into him, like super into him. And do you really think that your initial reaction would be to be grossed out?
At this point, no. Because I'm also at a place now where like I'm trying to go there. You know, I think me even a couple years ago, I think maybe would have been different, but I was also still like, I was still like figuring out who I was. I think now, and I've also done so much work to understand like what kind of a relationship I want to create and what safety looks like for me. And then that has to also extend to the other person.
Yes.
So like I would want to feel safe to cry in a relationship. And I think I'm at a point now where I can understand the hypocrisy of not feeling the same way. And I've never had a guy cry to me. I mean, if anything, I feel like I see this conversation happening and I'm like, we're so far from this conversation. I ask, this is a first date question for me a lot of times, the last time you cried. I've heard 2 years old. I've heard, can't remember the last, like I've not, you know, and once in a while, I feel like I'm starting to date guys who are like more sensitive and, you know, doing kind of more spiritual work. So definitely it is shifting. Maybe I think in the general culture and then maybe with the type of people that I'm dating as well. So, you know, I think it's changed. I'm hearing from men who are crying more, but like, I think we're still so far from a man feeling like they could cry, you know, on a second date, or even like in the early stages of dating and show that side of themselves. So I'm like, it's so hypothetical at this point because I'm like, I can't even picture, I don't know how I'd react because it would never happen.
It's so unlikely.
But I do. Yeah, I don't know, really.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to say.
I love that response, by the way. I love that you are operating with an ideal, that there's a change in culture that you want to see, and you're holding yourself to the standard of at least practicing being that change. I think that's incredibly important.
And what do you think about this?
Well, okay, so what I'm hearing from your side is like how women can approach it to create to create better outcomes and more closeness and more intimacy. But one of the things that I notice in women is like, we're doing the work, the men aren't, and they think that they're emotionally available, but I don't know if they really know what emotionally available is. And they're saying that they want emotional availability.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that they even really know what that is. So on the men's side, what I see happening with men is I think there's some confusion about how to be vulnerable. Now, most people, not just men, I think all people interact with other people in a way as strategies to gain approval. So it, like, a man being vulnerable is probably happening with the underlying hope that the expression of vulnerability gets the other person to choose him. and to move towards him.
Right.
And when they don't choose to move towards him, then it's like, oh, well, the vulnerability didn't work. You know what I'm saying?
My strategy didn't work.
Exactly. The strategy didn't work.
Versus I embodied vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. So when the reward is not the external thing, the person choosing to move towards you, when the reward is the expression itself, you set yourself up to energetically be much more attractive because you're present and you're free and you're liberated. There's also a few other things to say about that. But then you also put yourself in a position of power. And I don't mean power that like requires the disempowerment of someone else. I mean like creative power, where you can be like, okay, well, I like was vulnerable because the reward is the expression, and this person chose to shame it. Like I don't like that. That is not what I value.
Right.
And so I'm going to invest less in that person who chose to show up in that way.
Yeah.
You put yourself
But I still got what I want. Like it's what I wanted out of it has now shifted from her.
Yes.
You didn't get her.
Yes.
But I did get what I wanted out of this, which was to embody vulnerability and to live my new value system.
Yes.
And something I was thinking of, Flynn, not to cut you off, is when you were talking about this shift, this socioeconomic shift that's happening, and we're seeing like the data is showing the disparity between genders, is that these shifts are happening so quickly and our social system is changing so quickly. But the men of this current generation were raised and programmed under a system that will no longer work for them.
Yes.
And I think that's where, as women, it's not to excuse, it's not to condone like any of the behavior. It's not to, like express acceptance for a patriarchal system. But I do think we need to like come to the table with some compassion and empathy for the fact that even just using you as the example, right? We have a generation of men who, for the most part, were raised by men who the women in their lives needed them to open a bank account, financially, even just socially, right? There was something really socially wrong with you if you couldn't get married and have kids. All those social dynamics have shifted in the span of one generation, but the men of our generation were raised and programmed with the tools that were handed down to them by their fathers and their grandfathers, which is violence can probably get you where you want to go. Making a ton of money can get you where you want to go. Flashy things, sleeping with a ton of women. Imagine everything that was programmed into you from age 0 to 12 or to 18. And then you go out into the world to find a mate, to find a partner, to be happy, to have loving relationships. And now everything has changed, and those things will not only not get you anywhere, they actually will get you shunned and rejected by a new generation of women who don't need to accept because the social system has changed. So I think just like at least some compassion, empathy that like, everyone is just a packaging of the programs that were handed to them. And I think, again, like we all know this, that patriarchy hurts men just as much and in some ways more than, let me take back more, but it hurts men in its own
different ways.
And having an understanding that like if we had been born into this world as men, we would have received those programs and we might be struggling in the same way now.
Yes. So many amazing things in there. No, I'm tracking.
I'm like,
though.
So tell me about your rock bottom.
Though. It's I've got like 3 bookmarks in there. So,
yes.
All right. The first is the piece about compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy for me are paradoxical in that the goal of compassion and empathy is compassion and empathy. And also the goal is because compassion and empathy work to produce evolution. Shaming slows things down.
Beautiful.
And so it's
Thank
like,
you.
if you're a woman and this is the perspective on the world that I take. If you want a certain result, you are responsible for becoming the thing stick with me. You are responsible for becoming the thing from which that result naturally emanates, right?
Yes.
So if you want the result of this external thing of like men shifting in some way, you are responsible for being the thing from which that result emanates.
Yes.
Sometimes when I say that, women would be like, oh, we've been trying for years and decades. And I'm like, well, what you've been doing then didn't work. So like you didn't do it well enough. You weren't effective in the thing that you're trying to do. And also, I'm not just saying that for women. That's just the general perspective.
But it's a great point on evolution. And I think we can feel so frustrated when we get narrowed in on the tiny flashbulb of our lifetime, which is going to be 90 to 100 years.
Yes.
But I love that you use the word evolution. I'm obsessed with thinking about evolution. I'm obsessed with Eckhart Tolle. So, because then I think sometimes if you zoom out, you can see that like we are a tiny flashbulb moment in the larger span of like human evolution.
Yes.
And it's taking that perspective, I think, can help us get out of like the minutia of our day to day and how, of course, painful and oppressive and, unjust it can feel, but to understand that if we can embody something different, then we can play each of our tiny role in the evolution of the consciousness towards wherever the human species is headed.
It's just so much yes that it couldn't possibly be more yes. That's exactly it.
Flynn,
it's like clarity on the results you want to create, and then also clarity energetically on what is most effective in producing that result. And if a person as an individual has produced tremendous results in their life or tremendous internal transformation, that person knows that shame or blame actually increases the likelihood that the things that they don't like continue.
Yes.
Love and curiosity are the frequencies that soften things enough to become hydrated so that they can be adaptable and so that they can change.
Also because we shame and blame from a place of our own shadow, which means we haven't accepted those things in ourselves.
Exactly.
We haven't accepted, to take it all the way back, the vulnerability, the softness, even as women, maybe within ourselves. And that's why we would reject it in the other. We haven't accepted even power or even, positive aspects. Okay, we could go down this, rabbit hole.
Can we like, because there was another bookmark in there that I think you're going to like and I think is an important thing. And maybe even it transitions us. So when you're talking about the programming and men growing up in a particular programming and compassion for that, I think that is 100% true. And also, let me think about how to say this clearly. What we're talking about there is a model of a pre-existing hierarchy, like a prefabricated framework that determines people's value, like be this, right? And I find a mistake that a lot of people make is trying to replace one prefabricated hierarchy with another, right?
Yes.
So you with me on that so far?
I'm just picturing a guru.
Right? Okay. Yeah. So what I think we want to do, like what has worked for me, this was just a blessing. I don't know how this happened for me, but I just am so happy this happened. Rather than giving people hierarchies of value to fit into that say like, oh, if you are this way, then you have greater status, is helping people as individuals design their own hierarchies, right? Their own understanding of a value system and then holding themselves to the standard of being at the top of that hierarchy.
Yeah, because otherwise we say, okay, men, it's not, what you're doing isn't working. Go vulnerable.
Yes.
And then we get what you were saying before. I performed vulnerability and I didn't get the girl.
Exactly.
So fuck you, actually.
Exactly.
Versus, and maybe it's not vulnerability for you. Maybe it's joy. Maybe it's play. Maybe it's sensitivity, right? Like whatever that thing is going to be for your new value system. To your point, then even if you don't get the girl, you still fulfilled your new value system. Yeah.
So when people recognize that the things that they want in the external world are all about the same thing, and they recognize that something like love, or what we were calling presence before, is the thing that's at the top of their hierarchy, and they are choosing to be vulnerable, even if it's sadness, as an expression of love, and the reward is the expression itself, it sets people up to be discerning about how people respond to that, right? So like if you're vulnerable and expressive and then someone I was kind of saying this before, but if someone responds to you in a way that's cruel, it's no longer like, oh, don't be cruel to me. Please be nice to me and choose me. It's like, oh, that's like not it to operate that way. And I'm going to just like not.
Yeah, I accept your cruelty, but it can stay over there.
Exactly. It sets you up to be discerning and a wise investor of like what relationship dynamics you're going to pour your energy into. And that is the attractive thing. Like that's the desirable thing is discernment and holding yourself to the standard of embodying what you value.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for hours. And also, you are just so tuned in, Flynn. I'm like incredibly impressed. But I also have a sense that, which I don't know if we touched on this, but that you studied psychology. You were previously a licensed therapist. I don't think they teach you this at therapy school. That's not what it's called. But I don't think that you learn this, you know, kind of deeper sense of what's going on in therapy school. I feel like you learn these things through your own life experience. So let's get into, you know, what we're really here to talk about, which is tell me about your rock bottom moment.
My rock bottom moment. Okay. So it was actually like about a decade of rock bottom with really shitty moments in that decade. But at 18, two things happened that were kind of crazy. One, without my choosing, like it was just given to me by something. I don't know how this happened. I started to understand that material reality was what we see in the material world are symptoms of patterns of consciousness. And so
complex for 18.
I'm not like taking any credit for that.
Yeah.
It just happened. Like I understood that what we call consciousness is fundamental.
Were you reading about this? Were you taking mushrooms?
I was like,
no.
I'd been smoking weed since I was like 12. So I was smoking weed, but like it truly was just like a gift and a curse placed in my lap.
See.
And it was interesting because like, I just understood things that I felt so convicted by that were at the time so unaccepted in mainstream understanding of science and biology. Like
you're also 18. Your friends are like, let's go get high, drink a 40 and like find some girls.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So for instance, like epigenetics or neuroplasticity, I didn't know those terms, or Lamarckian evolution, which is like sort of a counter evolution to Darwinian evolution, which is more about like conscious intention is what creates evolution. It's not just random mutation. Like I would be in classes speaking about that stuff without any I didn't know the term epigenetics or neuroplasticity or Lamarckian evolution.
Wow.
But I'm truly not taking credit for this. It was just like something that happened.
Yeah, it was part of your path to receive that information for some reason.
I guess so. But it was like taking plant medicine with zero plan for integration. So all of a sudden my material world was entirely different and I had no idea how to be or to integrate into the world. And it sunk me into a super deep depression. I like very, very powerless. I didn't know how to take this perspective and do something with it in life.
Did it feel dissociating?
Yeah. Like I would look in the mirror and not know what I was looking at, which is something that's called depersonalization, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
So like about 10 years of depression and suicidality with that, like at least weekly, I'd be in the shower and be like, I just have to die. I don't know what to do with this.
What was the sensation? Was it not to use like a tired trope, but was it kind of like a matrix simulation feeling that you couldn't quite put your finger on? Okay.
Like I could, it was, and it also at the time being like, 19 and like reading philosophy and being like deep person and that kind of thing. I was like, yes, it was like, this is an illusion, but like really seeing the illusion of things, like really seeing the things that people invested in and seeing that what they thought they were investing in is not the thing that they were actually investing in.
Were you smoking weed through this whole time? Do you feel like if it had an impact, positive or negative?
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened like a few months after all that, I came back home for spring break or something like that. And I was with my friend and we rolled up, I guess it was like a dub of weed each into a blunt, which is like a normal amount for us to smoke. And he was totally fine, but I had to go to the hospital because it was like all of these, I didn't know how to be psychologically or spiritually safe I no longer had access to the frameworks that kept me safe before, that kept me like walled in a particular way. So it was part of it, but it was mostly just like an ever-present thing. Whether I was smoking weed or not, it was this thing that I couldn't escape.
And what was going on in your life at the time you were in undergrad?
So that was the second piece of it that is super interesting, was around like maybe within the same month that all happened, my dad got diagnosed with a chronic illness, which chronic Lyme disease, which he still is like
really tough.
It's been a real struggle for him. And that was fascinating because what I was able to see, and this gets us into very interesting and somewhat controversial stuff about chronic illness, that part of him needed to be sick. I could see that.
Yes.
But I didn't know how to speak to that in a loving and helpful way. I only knew how to shame him for that. Like, why can't you see that this is the symptom of this deep need to be sick in order to get attention and be perceived as inferior so someone saves you? Like, how do you not see that? And don't you see that you'll be stuck in this hole forever unless you recognize that within yourself? And a bunch of shit happened as a result of that.
Like
estrangement or there was this one night. So I think this was one of the pieces in the series of really shitty events. So as like he went down this path with chronic illness, so like it turned into like severe alcoholism and like abusing a lot of the prescription stuff that he was given. So he would combine like sleeping pills and I can't remember what this other thing is, but it's what people take to get off of heroin and alcohol. And we were in this tiny little 1.5 bedroom apartment and things would just get wild. So the one night, the first business I opened, I was 22. And the night before I was going to see my first person at like 6:30 the next morning, my dad got absolutely blasted, went out to this bar called Frank's Cocktail Lounge, which is actually a really sick bar. And I like love that he went there. It's this like Fort Greene establishment that's not there anymore. And, my mom was crying because they had gotten into something. It's like 1 a.m. and she asked me to go pick him up from the bar. So I go over there and I'm so annoyed, so pissed, so like grossed out by how he's operating. But I also understand that being kind is the thing that is going to be the least explosive. So I'm trying to be kind. He's annoying the fuck out of me. I take him home. He's saying stuff where I'm like, don't say it. We get inside and he starts like complaining about something. And finally I'm like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said something that I knew would be inflammatory. Like, you're fucking weak for choosing this path in life. And we got into a huge physical fight. And my dad is a tough motherfucker.
Yeah, sounds
so
like it.
Even though he's sick, like he would have, like, I think at the time still would have fucked me up. So I had this moment where I knew there was just like this one chance to not get fucked up by him, because he was in my face like a rabid dog telling me about how he's going to kill me, choke me to death. Slammed his face into the door frame and he got knocked out. Like those kinds of things ended up happening multiple times throughout my 20s. So it was this long string of rock bottom experiences like that, which ultimately I had to figure out how to emerge from that.
Which sounds almost like crazy to hear this story based on the first portion of our conversation, which sounds like you're in a lot of not love and light in a bypass way, but more like, really understanding yourself and talking about masculinity and toxic masculinity. But we have to remember that at this time, like, this was how you earned your stripes in your house. And this was the language that you and your dad were speaking with one another. Also very interesting that, obviously a parent getting diagnosed with an illness, chronic illness, is so challenging, but that at such a young age, you could see that bigger story that was playing out. We could even call it an evolutionary story for your family and for your father, but for the role that he plays in your sort of bloodline and the evolution of your family's sort of consciousness.
Yes.
You could sort of see that and not, I think a lot of teenagers, when their parents get diagnosed, it becomes a lot of despair for self. I'm sure there was some of that there, but can you just walk me through a little bit more like what you were experiencing there? And obviously it was like seeping into so many other parts of your life. It seems like the energy of this kind of illness and like the explosiveness of just kind of, to your point, it was almost like your family system needed to explode, and maybe masculinity within your family system needed to explode. And maybe that's why you've ended up here and not somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing to pick up on. So I did experience some despair, but mostly what I experienced was deep annoyance and aggravation that the people around me, because at the time I still like wanted my family to be a source of safety, especially because I just want to emphasize, like, it's all like, if you were to come hang out at my parents' house, you would love it. Like, they are so cool and funny and warm and loving. And also there are these dynamics there too.
Yeah.
But it annoyed me and was so aggravating to me that that they couldn't see what I saw. And it was so clear to me to see these kinds of things in everyone. And that's what I was meaning, what it kind of meant before, like it's a gift and a curse, because I didn't know how to effectively communicate what I was seeing in order to create or to contribute to evolution. I was only, and I still am annoyed about this and aggravated. And like, sometimes I lose my patience that like I'm like, why can the world like not see this? Like, how do you not understand?
It's that matrix experience.
It's that matrix experience.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So, it was almost like it was like, it invited me onto this path where I had to learn how to use this sense that I have, this thing that I see, in a way that actually helps other people, rather than using it in a way that just increases bitterness and resentment within me and like actually shame other people for not seeing it, which like honestly still is there. Like multiple times a week, I feel frustrated that it's so hard to help people understand this stuff. But also like it wasn't something that I chose, you know what I mean? It was a gift that was given to me.
And because it was kind of, it sounds like revealed to you in a sense at such an early age, but yes, probably confusing, but with a lot of clarity, it sounds like. You kind of like, pushed your face through whatever you want to call this wall that separates like our physical existence from whatever's behind it. If you want to use that kind of matrix, now you like your face was pushed through it.
Yes.
And then you sort of came back and everything was so clear to you, and then everyone else feels so blind. I feel like I have a very different experience, which is I have stumbled my way through spiritual awakening and understanding. I still struggle. I have to sometimes read books multiple times, or I pick them up and I'm like, I can't understand. I mean, Eckhart Tolle, I picked up over the years and years, couldn't understand a word of it until finally one day it kind of like clicked. And he talks about that being an experience, and certain Buddhist writings, things like that. So I've really like had to, and I haven't forced, I've definitely just been like, okay, I'm not ready for this, or, this teacher speaks to me more than this one, or whatever that may be. But because of that, I have so much maybe humility. I'm like I use like a joke disclaimer on a lot of stuff I put out that's like, I know nothing, don't listen to me. Whereas I think because you were 18 years old, you're kind of like, I actually know everything. Not in a toxic way, but
in a toxic way.
Okay.
Honestly, in a toxic way. There is like, one of the things that I'm like super, like what I really try to massage and what I try and massage and make beautiful, the shadow element of all of this is arrogance and grandiosity. Because at the time I was like everyone else is a fucking idiot. Like how, like, and so there was a lot of that, but, and I really like hearing you say that this is your experience of it, because like a little bit more stumbling through, because it reminds me of Julia's and her perspective on this stuff, and like the world's evolution is so much more peaceful and humble than mine is. You know,
Julia's your girlfriend.
Julia's my fiance.
Yes.
Yeah. It's similar kind of thing, because she's really had to struggle through the understanding. Whereas my struggle, I guess, is like, I feel like I actually don't understand that much more than what I understood at 18.
Oh, wow.
I just understand how to operate in a fun, warm, loving frequency as I share the perspective.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Whereas before it was like very angry and frustrated.
Yes.
And
No, but that's such a violent shock into spiritual awakening, which is receiving the information before you're kind of spiritually ready for it. And that's something I've had conversations with my spiritual teacher, coach who I work with, where she's like, you're not ready for this, so you're not going to get it. And I think I've actually sometimes had to be like, thank you, universe, you know, higher power, whatever you want to call it, for delivering me my lessons gently and in the time that I'm ready to receive them. I don't think you got that grace. You kind of got smacked upside the head, which is interesting because it might mirror our family dynamics. I was very coddled as a child. My family was super overprotective. Again, it was a very like North African kind of Arab, how I was almost like princess in a tower energy. Like I wasn't allowed to leave home much. I wasn't always allowed to like play with the kids in the neighborhood. I was like in the house a lot, almost like overly shielded from the world. So maybe that's why my spiritual journey, whereas your childhood was maybe a little more get smacked upside the head energy, right? Both in your neighborhood and in your household.
That's really interesting. And as I'm thinking about a client of mine whose family is from a similar region and I love her. She's amazing. And she like has princess energy also. And she's very like dip her toes in one thing at a time. Yes. Also, Julia is a bit like that also. I mean, she's like in some ways aggressively taking dives into life. But with this kind of stuff, it's a very like the flower is very delicate. Yeah. And if I try and push a little bit too hard, the flower closes up. And then I'm like, what the fuck? Like, don't you want like 100%? And she's like, no, it has to be. And what it's teaching me, which I love because I love her so much and I'm so invested in the relationship, is patience, like how to actually support the flower. Because if I'm trying to force the information in, it's not about the flower, it's about me. And if I'm actually invested in the flower's flourishing, then I must learn a way of engaging with the flower that's actually supportive for it.
But that's so beautiful because Julia will become such a beautiful teacher for you because maybe you haven't felt so gentle towards some of the other people in your life. So you have been trying to ram the door in.
Yes.
But she also probably won't accept a forced energy. So she's really forcing you to play with that more gentle, softer delivery of this message.
Exactly.
That you really have this like purpose to share with people.
That's exactly what it is.
I was always an anti-vitamin girl. Please don't come for me, but this is just how I felt. It never felt right taking pills, powders, or the most confusing, sugar-filled gummies to get the nutrients that we should be getting from our food. But as I got older and with every doctor's visit and blood work panel, it was becoming clear. I needed supplements. I was iron, vitamin D, and vitamin B deficient, and I could feel it. Sluggishness, oversleeping, and low mood. So I begrudgingly added these pills to my diet, but my blood work kept coming back the same. Then I met Sarah, the founder of GEM. She created a real food supplement which contains 20 vitamins and nutrients and is designed for maximum nutrient absorption. Sarah explained to me that poor absorption from capsules is probably why my blood work wasn't improving almost a year into taking my vitamins. I started taking GEM a few months ago and the results are undeniable. I've been taking their daily bite and I had my first blood work that didn't show vitamin B and D deficiency in over 2 years. Plus, the bites are actually delicious. Sarah kindly shared a code with us so you can get 15% off of your order using the code ROCKBOTTOM or by visiting dailygem.com/rockbottom. Thank you, Sarah, for creating this product and finally getting me to take my vitamins. Can you tell me a little bit more? You talk about this fight with your father and kind of one of multiple similar rock bottoms over a 10-year span. So, but during this time you go to grad school and you become a licensed therapist. So can you walk me through like you're moving through like deep depression, suicidal ideation, and dissociation, but simultaneously you are still like making things happen in your life. What does that look like? And you kind of describe your rock bottom as a 10-year period. Like, can you just give me the sort of the cliff notes of how you moved through that, and then definitely want to hear about what came on the other side.
Awesome. So I barely graduated high school and I barely graduated college. Since 7th grade, just experienced tremendous overwhelm, cheating on tests, forging report cards, just not doing what I was supposed to do, but then investing all of this frenetic energy into like cleaning it up and making it appear okay, which is connected with like the lying energy. When I was a senior in college, I had had it. I wanted to be regarded highly by the external world, but I didn't want to have to lie about it anymore in order to be perceived to be highly regarded by the external world. So I wanted to be all these different things. And my thoughts on this have changed over time. But at the time I was like, I want to be perceived as really smart. I want to be perceived as really athletic and this and successful and all this. So if I want to be perceived as that, but I don't want to lie anymore, it means I have to actually become that person and actually do those things that are associated with it. So I made a commitment to no longer lying. And that was transformative for me, to always telling the truth. And I didn't get it immediately, but it was like a commitment and a practice. And then I started my first business at 22 or 23 where I was doing this kind of stuff, but it was more in the space of like working with people's bodies. And I just like sort of miraculously got into grad school. It was probably my essay because my grades were atrocious, but I got into Penn, which is an Ivy League school. Now, when I first started my business and then when I got into grad school, they were really the only 2 times in my life where I felt like I achieved something externally that matched my sense of potential. I was like, oh, my external world is representing like this greatness that I sense in myself. And that had never happened before. And it built this momentum. And I went into grad school and I was super intimidated. Like I probably read 100 books in the 3 months before because I thought it was like, oh my God, this is an Ivy League school. Everyone is going to be so smart. But honestly, I got there and I'm like, oh, fuck. Like if this is an Ivy League school for psychology, like I'm about to, let's go. So,
and also who's my psychiatrist? Who's my therapist?
That's hilarious. So I was really successful in that program, which was the only time I had ever been successful in school. I graduated with a 4.0 at the top of my class.
But you're feeling low through this time, or you're starting to feel better?
The external success was helpful, but I was still super lost and confused and had no idea how I was going to take this thing that I have, this like sense, and turn it into something that was meaningful to me or valuable and create the life that I wanted to live. So I still felt super lost, but I was also like the external validation was building momentum for me. And then once in the experience of grad school, I was watching this interview with this basketball player. His name was John Wall. And he was talking about how he was watching some kids on film who were all Americans. And this is like a little bit cocky, but it's just the truth. Like he watched them and he was like, oh, that's my competition. Like I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had that experience in grad school. I was like, if this is what the top grad school is, like I'm taking on the world now.
But
So
but I'm also interested in how you also have now shifted like your inner state, right? Like you were no longer just like trying to cheat and like get someone to pass the test for you, but you like snuck your way through. You actually did the work, you read the books. So there's probably also was a sense of inner confidence that you may not have had before that suddenly. Because I feel like if you hadn't done all that work, you would have had a very different experience. You would have looked at those people completely differently.
Exactly. Yes, I think that's true, and I think a big piece of that was the commitment to not lying anymore. Because the truth is, I do want to be this highly multidimensional person. Like I want to publish 1,000 academic articles and like I want to beat Roger Federer in tennis when I'm 70 years old. Like, and I actually want to do that. I just want all these things. They're true for me, and in order to do those things, I have to actually do them. I have to build those things. And so that started in grad school. It's like, okay, if I see myself as someone who's successful in this vector, like I just have to do the things that actually are successful or aligned with success. And I was still super depressed and like miserable, but I was putting the pieces together. And I really did not think that I would make it out of my 20s. I didn't think that I would make it to 30. I thought I would kill myself before then because I just felt so powerless. And I kind of got to this place where I had one last shot, really, in order to create a life for myself that would be fulfilling and meaningful. And that shot was in content. I was like, all right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to figure out how to take this stuff and make it actually useful and helpful for other people. And if I do that, that will put me in a position where I have options and I have a sense of freedom and liberty to design a life that I find worthwhile and meaningful and valuable. So let's see how this goes. And I did that. And then it ended up, I mean, we'll see what happens like a year from now, but like, I think I'm on a trajectory where it's going to be fulfilling and happy for the rest of my life.
And can you tell me a little bit more about that shift point? Because I think you had started practicing therapy. You're still living in despair, effectively. Can you tell me what that experience is like to be offering therapy to people, but living with such a kind of darkness and despair in your own life?
Such a good question. Okay, so when I got out of grad school, the first thing that I did was take a job as a school counselor in the school district of Philadelphia. In order to become a licensed therapist after grad school, you have to accumulate like a few thousand hours of what's called supervised practice. And the fastest way to do that was having a job where I was working 40 hours a week and getting paid for it. So also I love kids and I'm interested in the educational system and interested in racial inequality. So like working in the public school system in Philly was a pretty good match. I loved it for the first 6 months. And then it was clear to me that lifestyle was just not it for me. The having to work within someone else's system. And I think that the systems of public education are in many ways designed terribly that use like fear and even like deepen and perpetuate trauma for kids in a lot of ways. And I just like, I could not operate in that space. So, I learned that you could open a therapy practice as a pre-licensed therapist. And it was clear to me that was the way out for me. If I opened that I was like, oh, I thought I had to become a licensed therapist first. So I learned that I could do that. I did that. And then I started to create content for it. So at the time then I had my therapy practice and I was working as a school counselor. So it was like 7:30 in the morning until 3, which was when school ended. And then I would start seeing clients at 4 and see clients until like 9 at night. So I was totally overwhelmed, totally overworked, but I had to do that in order to like be on the path. But in terms of supporting people while in a state of despair, Honestly, it's funny you asked, but I never even really thought about that because I knew that in a one-on-one setting, I could offer someone something really beautiful. Even if I was in a state of despair, I just knew that I could ask questions in a way and offer an energy that was loving and accepting. And I understood that in any kind of therapeutic relationship, like that's really all that it is.
Yeah.
That's the most valuable thing. But I also understood that I was doing something extraordinary and that the commitment to the extraordinary thing would over time multiply my capacity to be valuable for other people. And so I just knew that I was doing the thing that was part of a bigger story.
What's the extraordinary thing?
I knew that the extraordinary thing was designing a life for myself that was my own design, that where I wasn't forcing myself to fit in with a framework that other people had designed. I knew that I was creating my own framework, my own way of living. And I knew that that in and of itself was extraordinary, and to become a person who can do that is then able to help other people do that. So I just recognized the value of that. And I honestly never even like questioned like, oh, can I help people if I'm in a state of despair? I did question that at some points later on, but in that phase of life, I was just so like in the flow of it that I wasn't thinking about
powering through with this kind of like future vision of the kind of life that you wanted to live.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot of frustration with the people around you and the relationships you had when you sort of felt like you could see through the matrix and others were not grasping it. Did you have that experience with your clients? Or do you think maybe seeing clients was the beginning of unlocking some of that empathy that you're now leaning more into?
That's such a cool question. So this actually says something like fascinating about me, or like weird and strange. Some of my best relationships in life are with my clients. I'm able to show up for them in a way that feels so accepting and so sincerely curious, that I don't get frustrated with when they can't see things. It truly feels like an honor to have them ask me for help to go deeper into their internal worlds and understand things.
Yeah.
I experience more frustration with people outside of that setting because the relationship dynamic isn't such that I'm being asked to help them understand something.
Oh, interesting.
And so then I'm sort of in a position where I like feel forced to accept people as they are, when the truth is that I don't really accept. It's like,
no, it's a journey start to accept people, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And at least of all our parents, of course. Because I was going to ask, like, you clearly have the capacity for like extreme compassion, empathy, and acceptance for your clients. So it exists in you.
Yes.
And theoretically, we could apply, if we've experienced it once, we could theoretically experience it infinitely.
Yes.
So yeah, have you ever thought about like, or you probably do try to like pull that energy in when you're with your family or
totally. Yeah. And I think that I do experience myself as a very warm and accepting person. But I also, but I just want to be truthful and say that I also experience immense frustration with people. It's something I speak with Julia about all the time. Like, one of the questions that I continually ask myself is, who am I when I actually love and accept people for who they are, rather than pretending to love and accept them for who they are. And I find that the more empowered I am to create a life that I find to be beautiful, the more I perceive myself to be in the flow of taking my ideals and bringing them into form. The greater is my capacity to love and accept, to not need people to be different than what they are. But there is something in me there is also something in me that feels like it needs people to be different than what they are. But I see, but I recognize also that I don't actually need them to be different. It's my responsibility is to have a relationship with the version of me who thinks that I need them to be different.
Yeah. Beautiful. So you talk about shifting from this kind of pre-licensed therapy practice to starting to create content. Can you tell me about what you were sort of doing in your own life through this rock bottom that spanned a decade, which must have been so painful and must have obviously resulted in a lot of despair, feeling like this may never end, right? This feeling. What were the things that you were doing? Like, were you seeking therapy for yourself? Was there a spiritual practice? I know you said you were reading a lot and really digging into philosophy, but maybe in that disjointed time, that may have been aggravating the issue as much as helping it, right?
Yeah. So when I was 18, the purpose of my life became to design what I saw at the time as the perfect day. I wanted to wake up at 5:30 and do like qigong. I wanted to learn. I wanted to play sports and train like an athlete, and I wanted to eat amazing food, and I wanted to go to bed at like 8:30.
Okay, so at 18, how did you even know? I only knew about like getting to the party, getting a text back from my crush, and like getting my homework in on time. So how did you know about qigong? How did you know about getting clean food in your body?
That's hilarious.
Were you doing it through high school? Was there a mentor or someone in your family?
No, this is just one of those things where it's like not linear. It's not easy to track what exactly happened. What I remember is just, it's like life before and life after. There's like almost like a moment,
Was it graduating high school? Was that the timing?
No, it was like sometime in my freshman year of college, in undergrad. Yeah. But I don't even remember how I learned about qigong. All of a sudden, like when my worldview shifted and I started to see the relationship between consciousness and the material world, I guess my interest just changed. And the thing that I tend to do is investigate. So I just dove deep into the worlds of like esoteric philosophy and mysticism and all that stuff, and just learned a lot.
Yeah.
And then I guess in that time decided that the day that I wanted to live was that day that I was describing.
I also find that as our internal system starts to shift, and I think this is a beautiful thing at rock bottom, is that even the tiniest energetic shift, if you can even just for one moment say like, I want to get through this day, or I want to like make my struggling business successful, the universe will then magnetize something to you. So I wouldn't even be surprised if, I know you don't remember the specifics, but if like you then were walking through your campus and there was like a qigong table, or you're walking through the library, you're not even looking for a book, and suddenly a book catches your eye and it's something that you kind of needed. Yes. I feel like, because I'm also thinking like, I don't know your exact age, Flynn, but I'm assuming at 18, this was pre-algorithm, pre-scrolling like Instagram and TikTok.
35, so I think that Instagram
I think we were just Facebook when we were getting out of high school.
Yes.
So there was no algorithm and actually the algorithm I think can be a beautiful and helpful thing in this way, because I think it can kind of give you a piece of information you need in a given moment, the way that it gave me your videos when I really needed to hear some of those messages. But pre-algorithm, I still believe there's like an algorithm of the universe that is trying to pull things towards you. And I found that in so many ways, like getting referred to the spiritual coach who I work with was truly like a life-saving, like happenstance occurrence, or certain books that crossed my path, or certain little signs right when I needed them. So I wonder if maybe because you had this like epiphany moment, then your energy shifts, and even though you are struggling through it, the universe starts like bringing you some of those things.
That is the way that I think about it. That's what makes the most sense to me. It's like something shifted in my internal experience, and then the things that were the most helpful to multiply my experience just showed up in my world.
Yeah.
And this is something that I speak with clients a lot about, because one of the first questions that people ask when they're getting clear on something that they want is, well, how do I do it? How? What I have found to be really beautiful is living life in such a way where I'm almost never asking how. What I'm doing is getting clear on what I want to exist, the clearer I am on what I want to exist, the more it seems that the hows will just show up.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
think that that's what you're speaking to, like
Yeah.
something like Qigong. Like I have no idea how I learned about
Right,
Qigong. But like I was getting clearer on my what, and then the hows, the things ended up just showing up in my
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you have this vision of your perfect day. I'm finding it so fascinating because I think a lot of the guests that we've had on and a lot of my own paradigm of like what a rock bottom is and how you people move through them and how spiritual awakening ties into it. For a lot of people, it's like a descent downwards. You hit a rock bottom and then you get like, the come to Jesus or
Mm-hmm.
the something kind of strikes you.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like your spiritual awakening struck you as a lightning bolt, and then you had to kind
It
of
was like,
move through your rock bottom.
yeah, because I haven't really
Yeah,
had a come to Jesus moment. Like
right.
I've experienced actually a lot of pain. A lot of the family stuff has been very painful. Um, but but no amount of pain has led me to a come to Jesus moment.
Mm.
And that's something that I don't really understand. Maybe the rock bottom is going to come like 6 months from now and there will be like something like that.
No,
But
I don't think so.
it didn't happen for me like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I also wanted to ask, when you said you started designing your perfect day, we were talking about some of these like small energy shifts. Did your relationship start shifting around that time too? Or did you kind of have a friend group or related people in your life that stayed consistent through?
I really isolated. So
Yeah.
I remember like the the summer. So I spent a summer like after freshman year really thinking about this stuff and diving deep into it and reading and putting it into practice. And then I get back to school on the first day of my sophomore year, and like these guys who I love so much and I was great friends with them. It just came up to me, and I just remember the first words out of mouth. I was like, "Oh, fuck, I hate this."
Yeah.
And I went into this like for the rest of school, went into a pretty isolated state. I was in a relationship with someone at the time, and the way that one way of relating that changed, which was fascinating, was that I completely lost my connection to sexuality. I
Wow.
was dating someone, and we were having like amazing sex. Like actually, I look back at 18 years old, I'm like, holy shit, how were we pulling off sex that was that good?
Yeah.
And then it was gone. I couldn't
Oh,
even get hard
wow.
anymore. I like
Wow.
lost. I don't know exactly how or why that happened,
Right.
but completely cut off from my own sexuality, completely isolated from my friends, like just was reading and learning and not even going to class. But my room was really nice. Like I had dried flowers and stuff like that, which was hilarious. Yeah, I retracted from social relationships.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder what that, like, I always feel like whatever our bodies are telling us, like, there's something in it. So I wonder if there was something in that for you, like maybe conserving energy or maybe like, I mean, our sexual energy and creative energy, it's the same kind of like chi, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe your body was needing to conserve a lot of creative energy to like process these like realizations and things that you were having that it felt like it couldn't expend
It
somewhere else. Not to try to
No,
psychoanalyze
no,
your,
it certainly could be it. One of the
impotence.
things that has made sense to me about it is that, I was saying the business and school was the only, or like the first things that I was ever successful at where I felt like my external reality was matching how I perceived myself. I was a pretty good athlete in high school and played in college too, but it ended short with an injury. But I was so, I guess, miserable and so like I guess in a state of despair really through high school in particular. The only thing that I felt a sense of power over where I could be successful was in being guy who girls liked. And I think that when I think back on the ways that I interacted, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of things that I would just like cripple up and die from embarrassment, but I think generally I was pretty kind. but I was doing something with girls where I was like creating a bond and a connection because of my like ability to
Yeah, the
connect.
manipulation too,
Right.
right?
And there's
Yeah.
some manipulation in there, like basically just to have sex and have no desire for connection after that. And I don't remember doing it in like an evil way, like I'm gonna smash and then be gone, but that is the pattern that would happen. So I like accumulated quantity of something, like having sex with people and having girls be into me as my like value system. That was the thing that was making me valuable or perceive that I had some sort of status. And then I realized at this time when everything shifted that my way of achieving status was inherently harmful to other people. It like gutted me. And that seems like the most obvious thing ever, but it hit me like a storm. And I think I hated my relationship with sexuality so much that it's almost like I forced myself to cut off from it. And if I had a high sex drive from 19 to 25, let's say, even if I wanted to change the way that I was pursuing success and validation, I don't know if I could have actually pulled that off. So I don't know like if it was divine intervention or just my own intervention or what. I'm so grateful that I was disconnected from sexuality in that period of my life because I learned like a motherfucker. Like I didn't have the desire to pursue value in that way. And what I ended up doing was just staying inside and learning all the time, like designing curriculum for myself and reading. And it was miserable and I was deeply ashamed of it. Like to be like a man and to like not be able to get hard is the craziest thing.
Yeah. Especially when that's all that your value was coming from before.
Exactly.
I really appreciate you speaking openly about this. I don't think that most men do. I think it's also incredible that you were like moving through this realization and this shift at such a young age of 18 when most men and most people in general are kind of like coming into sexuality and then you leave home. So now you want to go like all the way, you know, do whatever you want. But I think that I really have found that changing your relationship to sexuality can be such an important part of changing your patterns and your dynamics. At the end of the day, if you want to change yourself in your life, you have to pattern interrupt. And for a lot of us, a very, very strong pattern is always going to be connected to how we relate to love, which sex is intrinsically part of. And then there's also like an over and underlying power dynamic that's at play there, which is what makes it so charged. It's like who has power over who. Going back to the systemic kind of issues that we all live within, there's always going to be feelings of superiority, inferiority, who took something, who gave something, who lost something, who gained something. And I think that for me, I have also found that like moving through a period of celibacy was really, really important. It was also at the time where I kind of went into this really dark place. I finally kind of reached a point where I was like, I can't engage with one more person on a romantic or sexual level until I figure out what the fuck is going on with me. And I don't know, I agree with you. Like, I don't know if I had been like doing spiritual work or trying to do healing work, but still engaging with the very thing that was harming me could have. And, you know, obviously there are different dynamics and there's gender dynamics, but what you were doing was harming maybe others, but it was harming you too.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think that that's where, you know, and I've talked to a lot of people and I don't have a strong opinion on this, but whenever I talk to a lot of men, a lot of male friends who are making really big shifts and really like moving through a spiritual journey, and I recommend celibacy a lot of the time if you can even do a month. And imagine feeling like you can't abstain from something for 1 month, what that really means about your relationship to it. Almost anything in life, unless it's food and water. So, and you know, and then I have guy friends who, have like maybe resisted that. And then either through their spiritual awakening, almost get to a point where they no longer want to, or have the drive or feel the need to engage in kind of like the meaningless sex or the conquest sort of relationship with sex, or they get to a point where they're like, I do need that celibacy, you know, month or 6 months or year. And I feel like a lot of the people we've had on this podcast have gone through a period of celibacy. A lot of people have, cut out alcohol or drugs or other things. And I really appreciate you speaking on that, especially as a man. I know that that's not a conversation that a lot of people are kind of willing to have. And I think it also gives me a really good framework of like this rock bottom period, because I think it was also a quite extended period, maybe because you were so young, of death and rebirth, right? You had like a whole paradigm and program of what being a man was. Then you received some kind of information or epiphany at 18 that deconstructed that. And then you sort of had to like awkwardly trudge through your 20s of becoming someone who was going to derive their value from something else.
Yes.
Not sex, not like physical accomplishment, maybe not just like the typical understanding of like money or, even like getting into the top school and being a little bit disillusioned by what that even meant for you.
Yes.
And then really coming out the other side of it with having formed your own value system to bring it full circle to what you said in the beginning you feel is really important for people. So maybe we can just close the conversation. I'd love to just hear on kind of it sounds like you now have spent a few years a bit on the other side of it. I know rock bottoms and emotional and spiritual growth is an ongoing, process for all of us for the rest of our lives. But I'd love to hear what that shift out has really felt like, and also what you feel like you maybe have manifested or been able to create, maybe not in spite of the rock bottom and the challenge, but maybe because of it.
By the way, insane summation. I love it.
I'm only going to interview people like you. You validate me so much.
Really fucking good. So good. So what I have come to find in myself, there seems to be a direct relationship with suicidality and sense of disempowerment to create in the material world. When I don't feel creative, when I don't sense like competence and ability to take my visions and turn them into reality, it's I'm so quick to think about dying as the best thing to do.
Wow.
And it happens still maybe a couple times a month. What has been so meaningful and powerful for me is to learn the creative principles of the universe and understand what it takes internally and externally to take a vision and bring it into form in reality. Increasing my sense of competence and confidence to do that is paired with a decrease in a sense of disempowerment and suicidality. There's also something in me, like I also think that I'm in some ways, just the way that I think about life is like, okay, let's say there's a field of infinite possibility. One of those possibilities is that like tomorrow I wake up as a woman in North Africa, right?
Yeah.
Like a North African woman, but the probability of that does not have that much density to it. So I think in the field of possibilities, there are probabilities that have more density than others. And that gets into a really interesting thing because I think the reason I wouldn't wake up tomorrow as a North African woman is because no one expects me to.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Whereas if 50% of the population expected me to, like there could be a chance that, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. That's cool.
We can go there.
That. Yeah.
We can go
I
there.
like that. So, one of the probabilities in the timelines of my life that has some density to it is that I end up like reclusive in a library with greasy hair surrounded by papers and like going insane, which is something that Julia and I speak about a lot. And in some ways it feels like my capacity to create in the world, like that has some gravitational pull to it. And in some ways it feels like my capacity to create in the world is actually just about running away from that. But what I'm trying to do is to have this creative momentum, this like love and appreciation and awe and wonder materialize in my world in such a way that it creates a gravitational pull that really decreases the density of that probability.
Yes,
I don't want that, but part of me kind of does.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So that's what I notice is like the more I'm able to be clear on what I actually want the frequency that I want and the material results that seem like they'll multiply those frequencies, and the better I get at actually creating those results, the greater my sense of power is, and the more love for life that I have. But it does feel like there's this gravitational shadow that could pull me into it.
Yeah. And I think that just brings us back to, I think as long as you're running away from the life that you don't want, you've still centered the life that you don't want.
Yes.
So you're still energetically attached to it in some way. And it's not until you almost it's in the rear view mirror and you need to like break off the rear view mirror. You're only driving forward from here on out. And I think, the word the creator is used across like every religious and spiritual text because there's something so true about creation. I think that's like we come from creation and we are creation. And I think that's why feeling alive and feeling like there's a reason to live is always going to be born out of that creative energy. Mm-hmm. I think that's like a beautiful place to end on. And we just have a few things that we like to close out with. So I just want to be mindful of your time, Flynn. So we're going to do a few rapid fire questions, Flynn. Just the first thing that pops to your mind. What is a small thing during that time that you feel made a huge difference?
It's actually not that small of a thing. I don't think that this is true, but I like operating with the perspective that I am the only conscious entity in the universe, or that you are, and that I'm not even real. And so anything that is outside of you is a projection of something within you. Mm-hmm. And if there's a particular pattern that you don't like, you are creating that pattern and you are responsible for changing that pattern if you want it. Even in the most extreme cases, I apply that perspective to myself. So like when things get particularly rock bottom for me, I'm seeing that as external projections of what exists internally. And if I want to change something externally or create a transformation, I'm responsible for seeing, one, what part of me is investing in that thing that I don't like, and what are the benefits of that, and how can I integrate that within myself so that I have a much greater capacity to create patterns that I do like.
Yeah, it's radical responsibility, but then you get power from that responsibility. What is a book, movie, song, or work of art that you feel saved you during that time?
Whoa. So it's not a book, but it's a topic, which is sometimes referred to as evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology. I hated the idea of needing other people. I even saw laughter as weakness because it was just like seeking affirmation or validation. But when I learned from an evolutionary perspective how vital bonding is to flourishing, it became like a religion for me. It gave me permission to want other people.
So we always end with a message from the guest before you. Here's today's message.
This is something that I recently learned. Maybe this is for someone who is a little bit more towards the rebirth end of their death and rebirth, but it's that they've shed their snake skin and now they have this new skin and they're starting to move through the world with it. My message is to just be very gentle with yourself while you're learning how to move through the world with this new, very tender, very raw skin. You've never walked through this world with that new skin before. You are like a baby with fresh eyes. And because you did all of that work to shed your old skin and shed so much of what is not you and the armor that you built up around yourself to protect you from your sensitivity, from your power, from your magic, you are now walking through the world with a much greater level of sensitivity. And so just be so patient, so gentle with yourself while you are learning how to move in this new body with this new sensitivity, with these new gifts, with this heightened sense. It's going to take some time, but you can't force a flower to bloom, and you will absolutely bloom in your own time. And it's happening right now. And I'm so proud of you.
That is incredibly sweet. And I loved that message.
Flynn, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and have a beautiful day.
I've loved this conversation.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry we didn't keep a
That's
better
okay.
eye on time.
This was awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Rock Bottom. If If you enjoyed this conversation, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, follow, and leave us a review. And if there's someone you love who could benefit from this conversation, we'd so appreciate you sharing this episode with them. You can find the Rock Bottom Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at rockbottom.pod on Instagram and TikTok. We'll see you next time.
Rock Bottom was created by Mayssa Chehata and is produced by me, Desta Wunderad. With production support and audio engineering by Johnny Simon, this episode was produced and recorded in New York City by Wonder Studios. Thank you for listening.